The next two lessons, we're going to look at the graphs of polynomial functions. And so if I'm looking at the graph of x cubed minus 2x squared minus 5x plus 6 that is shown right here, I have three zeros, because remember that the zeros are equal to the roots as well as the x-intercepts of our function. And so in the function x cubed minus 2x squared minus 5x plus 6, my zeros are my x-intercepts, and they're shown right here crossing the x-axis. And so if I want to say the zeros of the polynomial, then I'm going to be left with -2, +1, and +3, which means that the factors are going to be x plus 2, x minus 1, and x minus 3. And if I were to write those in polynomial form, I'll be left with p of x is equal to x plus 2 times x minus 1 times x minus 3. Now, if we were to plug these graphs into our calculator, I would plug in my first function, which is just my polynomial. So x cubed minus 2x squared minus 5x plus 6, and x plus 2 times x minus 1 times x minus 3. And if I graph these, my two graphs should overlap. And so we're only going to see one graph here. All right, great. Now let's look at the next example here. And this is a fairly quick lesson. It'll only take a couple minutes. What we want to do is use the graphing calculator to sketch this graph. And so go into our y equals setting and work with negative x cubed this time. So negative x cubed plus 4x squared plus 7x minus 10. If I graph my function, it's going to look something like that. All right, so this is just a rough sketch. Now, if you look at where my zeros are, that's the first thing we want to do is state the x-intercepts, or our zeros. And so I have one that looks like it's at, if I look at my graph, then that's at -2. I have another one at +1, and my last one is at +5. And remember, we can use our calculator to determine that the exact values, rather than me just estimating and looking. So I do have that value at -2, and if I move over here, I can state the next zero of my line, which is at +1, and my last one is going to be, it will be at 5. You can check if you want. So the x-intercepts equal -2, +1, and +5. Now, if we were to write this in factored form, then remember that this takes the form of x plus 2, x minus 1, and x minus 5. And if it's negative, if we had factored that, we would have factored that negative out in front like that. And in polynomial factor form, I should write that as p of x is equal to -x plus 2, x minus 1, x minus 5. Now, if I were to examine this graph and I look at the left arm, notice how we're going upwards. That means that the left arm of my graph is rising, and the right arm is then falling as I go downwards into -infinity. Upwards was going up to +infinity. The degree of my polynomial, that's my degree, so we're odd, and the leading coefficient is going to be -1 in this case. So that's essentially it for lesson 7. It's pretty straightforward, and hopefully it won't take you too much time. It's something you can work on at home.